Let's talk about the value of discovering problems early, which can literally save lives. In The Godfather, Don Corleone famously says, "Give me the bad news first." This wisdom reflects a fundamental truth. Early awareness of problems gives us the utmost opportunity for addressing them effectively. Let's explore how this principle shapes agile culture, contrasts with traditional approaches, and becomes even more relevant as AI systems enhance our ability to detect potential issues before they escalate. The first thing that we need to understand is that there are psychological barriers to acknowledging problems. It sounds crazy, and I think that fundamentally everybody wants to know and wants to deal with issues. However, there really is a psychological block, a barrier that company cultures create that prevents people from speaking up and sharing what they know when there are issues. Remember, I've talked about the overbearing, the really strong leader persona. That kind of culture that has that, which is traditional and waterfall, hierarchical, top-down type of cultures, this perception of knowledge, of authority, of power is something that gets in the way because people can't be dealing with bad things. Bad things don't happen because you have everything under control. For crying out loud, we never put a problem into the plan. Why is there a problem all of a sudden? What kind of failure, what kind of incompetent fool are you to allow a problem to happen if we didn't plan for it, if it's not in the way that things are supposed to be? This is kind of the mindset that's happening tacitly, quietly, but that's what's going through people's cultural perspective. So there's a real fear of looking incompetent when we speak up and we say, "There's an issue here. I see a problem." What do you mean? That's not supposed to happen. It's not part of the plan. Another aspect that plays is this element of the hero culture. In the hero culture, it's not just people always wanting to shine and look like the heroes that save the day, but there's a bit of a subliminal, sometimes subconscious. I'm not suggesting that there's anything intentional, but there is a subconscious aspect which delays in dealing with issues, and then there's the opportunity to have a dramatic rescue at the end. So people who engage in this kind of mindset that it's good to be this hero, always solving issues, may favor being preoccupied and attended with other things and kind of put this problem to the side, fully knowing that they're going to come in at this last minute and save the day. It's a bit of procrastination that leads to saving the day. These two elements and others really create a culture that's not willing. It doesn't want to see the problems early. It's want to hide them. And early detection makes a big difference. If we allow ourselves to always be looking for the problems early on, that gives us more time to find solutions. It gives us greater flexibility. There's a real cost to an increased cost and effort that happens when we don't see problems early on. And the longer that we wait, exponentially later the issues are going to be costing us more time and effort as we have to deal with them later under crisis. Whereas if we deal with them early on, we have more options. We have the ability to see the problem from a very broad perspective because we have some space to breathe and think. And then we can think, "Oh, okay, well, this situation, we have these options. These are the pros and cons. This is the option I'm going to go to," as opposed to just a reactive. We have to do something, save the day. Again, that hero mindset. So between having psychological blocks and missing the opportunity for early discovery, we're really setting ourselves up for big, big, big problems that didn't need to become big problems. In our daily lives, we we see these things happen all the time. Let's say that you look up in the ceiling and you see this tiny little drop that sometimes under heavy rain, you see it and you go, "Oh, something to deal with." And you just put it out of mind until the day that you have this big bubble of water exploding, splashing all over the place, and now you've got a huge problem to deal with. It's like that. The earlier that we find the problems, the earlier that we see the problems, the earlier that we start dealing with the problems, the simpler it's going to be. Traditional waterfall, again, because of the hierarchical command and control and really strong leader persona, doesn't want to deal with problems. It really wants to see everything going according to plan. We're supposed to be setting standards. We're supposed to be repeatable. We're supposed to be highly predictable. This problem stuff, no, we don't want any of that. I mean, of course, I agree. We don't want for there to be problems. But if the reality is that we have a problem, how do we deal with it? And the waterfall culture doesn't allow that. There's no room for it. So what ends up happening is what we term the watermelon reports. Watermelon reports are green on the outside and red on the inside. They're hiding issues to avoid scrutiny. It's not, when I talk to companies about this and I first introduce the concept, and some people get offended. And I go like, well, that would be unethical. That would be wrong to hide things. Nobody wants to hide things. However, when the culture doesn't allow that, that's how we end up shaping things in a way that becomes more digestible, more palatable. And that's how, over time, we end up with the watermelon reports. Those that just simply look great because that's how you can get through the meetings without being beaten up. Nobody likes that. So, this is the end result. And what that does, in reality, what it does is that sure, we can have a whole bunch of great meetings, everything went great, everybody smiles, no problems. And that eventually leads to failure. And this is a failure spiral. It gets worse and worse and worse rapidly. So hidden problems create this technical debt. And by technical debt, I don't mean that it has to be the technology. It can be any kind of issue that becomes delayed. A delayed issue is not going to stay at the same level indefinitely. Over time, anything that we haven't dealt with starts becoming compounded, and it becomes much harder and much more expensive and much more effort requiring to solve it. So small issues that are ignored become expensive crises. And then we have to deal with them. And then at that point, yes, we are going to have very unpleasant meetings to deal with the issue. But that's what happens when the culture doesn't allow us to speak up about issues early on. So there's a real cultural impact of problem avoidance. Employees fear blame rather than focusing on learning. And leadership ends up shielding themselves from bad news. Again, it's not part of the plan. So why do we have to deal with this? What went wrong? Who is the incompetent? Who is the failure? That's the way that it's approached. And that discourages people from speaking up. So we end up incurring the cost of delayed discovery of our problems. And there are real world consequences to this. One that has been in the news a lot, and people are becoming more and more aware of what happens when company cultures aren't aligned with openness and honesty, transparency about what's going on or the issues that we have, not just our successes. It's always fun to talk about successes. More importantly, is talk about where there are issues, where there are challenges, where there are problems, so that we can resolve them and prevent bad problems from growing. A perfect example is Boeing. Boeing with the 737 MAX, for example, and there are many examples on Boeing, but this is one that's hit the news a lot, so a lot of people are aware of it. This is a software issue that wasn't identified but ignored. There were early warnings, and ignoring them ended up in people losing their lives. The company's focus it started focusing on rapid certification. That was the priority to get the 737 MAX to the market. And that created a culture where risk mitigation and transparency were deprioritized. Boeing also minimized the significance of the maneuvering characteristics augmentation system, MCAS, during the certification process. And that is what led to the ultimate issues that led to the accidents. This system was primarily intended to make it easier to deal with certain circumstances while flying. But the pilots needed to be aware of it because the plane was going to respond differently. And there were some scenarios where it could interfere with the pilot's decisions. And in order for the pilots to be aware of it, they required additional training. Well, the additional training was going to cost more and introduce delays for the certification, which Boeing didn't want. So as a result of that, they overlooked a lot of early warnings And that's what contributed to the lack of awareness of the system's functionality. And that's ultimately what resulted in 346 people losing their life. So this is the way in which this cultural aspect that doesn't allow people to speak up and deal with things creates this myopic view in companies that allows real issues to just go by until something bad happens. That's the danger. That's the problem. So Agile deals with problems completely differently. Agile fosters transparency, and that transparency brings about a lot of benefits. When teams are empowered to raise their concerns without fear of retaliation, we hear what's going on early on, and sometimes, no, it's not a big deal, and you just get by it, and sometimes it's a real issue that if you can deal with it early on, now you can prevent problems from happening down the road. So there's this concept of failing fast, the fail fast principle. We want early feedback loops, and we get those. Agile is structured around that, where there's a daily stand-up, retrospectives, incremental deliveries. There's a lot of opportunities along the way, every single day, all the time, for somebody to speak up and say, hey, while we were doing this, we noticed this. Oh, let's talk about that. Let's figure it out. This prevents problems from becoming big. And it just becomes part of culture. It's no longer talking about a problem. It just becomes talking about something that needs to be dealt with. That's just life, and deal with it. But we need to have those conversations. We need to build psychological safety. We need to create environments where failure is treated as learning. Now, I want to be very open and transparent about this. When I talk to companies about this, that the failures, opportunities to learn, I get a lot of resistance now because it feels like there's this that we're heading into this black and white view of participation trophies and zero accountability. That's not what we're talking about at all. Both are valued, meaning the recognition of there's an issue, so this is an opportunity to learn, and viewing it that way, not labeling problems as problems, which is a defeatist and a failure and a negative, all of those connotations, but it's an opportunity to learn. Yes, we favor that. We want to nurture that perspective. And we also favor the transparency that eventually leads to accountability. Both are important, transparency and accountability. And accountability becomes even stronger because when we give people the opportunity, there's so many opportunities along the way to speak up, to notice something, to act on something. When we get to failure, to real failure, catastrophic failure, well, then a lot of questions are legitimately asked. It's like, how come we missed all of these opportunities before? There's been plenty of opportunity to not get to that. So there is accountability, absolutely, in Agile. And there is transparency along the way, which hopefully the more transparent that we are, the more opportunities we give, not just to ourselves, but to everybody around us to contribute to prevent failure from happening. So there's a lot of reward that comes from that transparency, as long as the environment supports it. And that's not going to happen if we haven't established psychological safety. I've talked about that in another video. This is a prominent teacher who talks about this. Is Amy Edmondson from Harvard. And she explains to us that psychological safety, it's not about always nice, always pleasant, always fun. That's not psychological safety. It's about candor. It's about truly believing that we can express ourselves and people want to hear what we have to say so that there can be a discussion about this. And the discussion leads to better results. Not talking about things is what leads to failure. So when we're able to establish the psychological safety and people are open to participating, to looking, to being engaged, they start looking for the issues, they start looking for the problems, and they start speaking up about them. In some implementations that I've seen this, it can get a little crazy, especially at the beginning when we haven't done that for a long time. There are a lot of problems that may be festering, and then we roll this out, and all of a sudden it's a problem, all left and right, left and right, left and right. It can get a little frantic, especially at the beginning. But once we've established in a company, once the company is open and we are engaged in looking for problems, everybody has that mindset. Now we can implement really cool things that lead to significant shifts and improvements in the way that we operate. A perfect example is in Toyota. Toyota implemented what's now called the Andon Cord. In the Andon Cord, workers have the ability to stop the assembly line to address defects. Think about it. From the time that this emerged, I think early on in manufacturing, the concept of stopping the assembly line, oh my God, it's like you needed the CEO's approval, because the moment that you start the production line, you're going to start losing money. And if we're going to start losing money, we're talking big amounts of money. We want the CEO on board to make that decision. Yeah, on the one hand, okay, yeah, we can see the logic about that. But what if the issue is that somebody just spotted a problem that's about to make the machine completely break? A nut, a bolt, or something is out of place, or somebody's at potential danger. There's a life at risk that they're about to slip and head right into the machine and be killed. We don't have time to call the CEO and get a decision on that. We want the person who's right there looking at things, who has the information and a working brain to decide, yes, this is the moment that we need to stop this. That's what the undone cord allowed people to do, to make the decision and call. Obviously, you want to make sure that you make good decisions. You're not going to stop the production line just because. And if you see something, you take action immediately. Considering not taking that action, the breakage of the machine could cost the company a lot more to replace the machine, days, months, whatever, to do a replacement. It could be a lot more costly than whatever cost we incur from stopping the line at that moment. Or worse, somebody could lose their life because we didn't take action right away. This is the way that we create a culture where you see something, you do something. That doesn't happen. It's a great ideal, and we all want to do that. But it doesn't happen if we don't create a culture that values somebody speaking up and saying what they see right away and taking action. That doesn't happen. These two things are necessary. We need to create the culture that supports it. Another thing that this kind of thinking leads to is really in embracing problems as real opportunities to improve. And I think a perfect example is Netflix. Netflix implemented what's now called Chaos Monkey. It's now an older way of doing things, but the principles are still hold today. And what it is, what they did back then is they deliberately introduced this concept of deliberately introducing failures to test their system resilience. So all along, they had built systems that they expected would be able to respond in particular ways, redirect traffic, load balance globally, move user traffic as needed, whatever kind of failure, security threats, all of that. They designed systems that they were confident, they had gone through test periods, and they were confident that would perform under certain conditions and respond as expected. Well, do they? The best way to find out is to do it on your production systems. The concept was crazy at the time. Service reliability engineering, as I read today, is part of that thinking, but that originated from those kind of early experiments where people opened their minds to intentionally, quote unquote, damaging their systems and services to confirm that the expected behaviors would indeed respond as expected. And that gave companies real wake up calls to, oh, we thought that this is what would happen. But in reality, this happened. We learned from that. And now, without having a crisis, without being in the middle of a crisis, now we can deal with that. We can go back to the drawing board and address the deficiencies that our test uncovered. So there's a lot of opportunity if we are open to getting that bad news early. If we just go on the mindset of the project plan has been executed, we've done that, check, check, check. Yes, we've satisfied all the requirements. Fantastic, it's out there, move on to the next thing. And we don't have an open mind, we're going to miss that opportunity. So this is where Agile really handles things very differently. It really embraces these failures and these problems as learning opportunities that we can do better, that we can improve our process. This is part of the continuous learning mindset, Kaizen, and we intentionally look for problems. We don't shy away from them. It's not the watermelon report that's trying to shape things in a way that's more palatable. It's something more raw, more real that says, where are the problems? I want to find them. And we intentionally do things to find and uncover problems so that we can improve our products and services to even better levels. And talking about better and making more and more of this is, of course, where AI comes into play. Because AI has an ability to bring these approaches, this mindset, to a whole new level. For example, early detection. AIs are phenomenal. One of the strengths of AI is patterns, pattern recognition. So you establish an AI that has the task of looking at patterns of performance, execution, behavior. It doesn't have to be software, it can be people. For example, crowd management. The AI may not know what the issue is, and it does know that the pattern has shifted. So if it detects that under a given condition, let's say there's a big crowd, there's something that's out of pattern, out of sorts, now it can give the early warning that a human might not notice. Now it can give the early warning to a human saying, something's off over here. Take a closer look. Instead of a human trying to look at every possible thing all the time, which would be exhausting even if we could do that, the AI can take care of that and can really limit our human energy, time, and efforts to looking at those places where the pattern is off. And the human will make the decision, oh, okay, yeah, this is what's going on, not a big deal. Or, oh, okay, there's something going on in here. Let's take a closer look. AI is able to spot the anomalies in whatever is happening, software, finance, manufacturing, people, whatever it is, because it has that ability to notice patterns and its changes. It can also do predictive analysis. It can forecast maintenance issues, customer churn, security threats, anything, because it has ability to model situations and figure out and predict what's going to happen. It can also gives us warning system implementations where AI-powered dashboards provide proactive alerts. Maybe something similar to and on cord, although maybe we're not quite ready and maybe it would not be as wise to give that ability to an AI system, at least not today. But thinking about it, what may be something that an AI system could do? When an AI system could, talking about detecting things that are out of pattern, it could detect worker fatigue, for example, in a production line, and or maybe some fault on their part that could lead to safety concerns. Maybe the worker is about to experience some physical situation that would put them at risk. Well, the AI system can detect and can signal, no, this, we need to do something about this, can signal a human being to make the decision. Let's be careful on how much decision-making power we give to the AIs. That, I think, we have to be very careful, especially at this stage. However, we can use the power of AI right now to give us the early warning as early as possible. And the AIs can absolutely do that much, much, much better, faster, and reliably than humans can, just by their sheer ability to look at a vast amount of information as quickly as they can. So it's a cultural readiness importance. We need to establish that for our culture, it's okay to surface issue. Remember what I said at the beginning, the waterfall model doesn't like to deal with problems. It's not in the plan, so why are we dealing with problems? Who messed up here? Okay, so if we have that mindset, and then we introduce the AI system, well, it can go many ways. It could go in resulting in the surfacing the problems that then leadership could say, well, who's been at the sleep at the wheel all this time? It can be a real shock, a real discovery, and it can come with real consequences because leadership had been shielded from all the issues. And now all of a sudden you have this AI system flashing red left and right. These are not watermelons. These are just tomatoes all over the place being thrown at them. So of course they're going to react very negatively. So that can be really dangerous. Be careful in the implementation. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying be mindful that that can be the outcome, especially if you haven't dealt with the issues for a long time. Or another thing that can happen is that leadership looks at it and says, well, this thing is clearly broken. We've been perfectly fine for years and years and years, never had a problem, and all of a sudden we have problems. It's the AI system. That's its problem. Completely ignoring the value of the AI system. So culturally, it's important to establish that it's okay to talk about issues. Now you're ready to introduce the AI system and benefit from what it has to tell you. Otherwise, it's just going to become another watermelon report. We're going to fine tune the AI system to be better at its reporting, meaning hiding it better, like we've been doing all along. What's the point? What's the value? You know? So AI systems should support, not replace human decision making when we do this. So make sure to be involved, engaged in the process. If you're going to implement something like this, make sure that your culture is ready to accept the information that you're going to get from AI systems, and make sure that you're ready to act on them. As I mentioned earlier, when you first implement this kind of approach, you're going to get a lot of reports. One way that I've seen it implemented is that companies will start rewarding people for surfacing issues. Where before there was the fear and like, oh, I can't say anything, and it was scary. Now there's a reward system. So it becomes a competition. And people get really engaged about it. It becomes a, oh, who's going to find the next one? I'm going to find it. I'm going to find it. So when you do that, be prepared that at the early stages, you're going to get overwhelmed. That happens very often. There's going to be a lot to deal with. Well, the good news is that now you know. Now it's clear. Now it's transparent. It's out in the open. Now we can create a plan to deal with it. And over time, it's going to get better. Over time, it's going to be really just getting the signals when they happen and dealing with them. So the first thing for moving in this direction is you want to create a safe space for transparency. You want to establish blameless retrospectives. Some people may say postmortems are different things, but it's having a blameless meeting where you can have a discussion about what's happened, and then from there you can implement improvement plans. The most important is those meetings can't be screaming matches, they can't be judgments, they can't be finger pointings. Stay on the issue, deal with the issue, talk about the issue, and then figure out the action plan and deliver with some actions against that action plan. If all you do is you have the meetings and nothing comes out of them, people are going to tune out of it because they're not going to see any value in taking the risk of raising issues and then all of a sudden nothing happens out of them. So you really need to take action, follow through. And when you do have those conversations, really celebrate the fact that you've talked about it and you're now aware, you've brought awareness about what needs to be dealt with. You really have to build trust through your actions. Is reward that early detection and expression of issues, not just the solutions. It's very easy to reward and celebrate. It's like, oh, we solved this, we accomplished. That's very easy to do. You need to shift it left and also reward and celebrate. We found more things. We're better aware now than we were before. Another thing that you want to do is implement this is have good ways of measuring your improvements. Key metrics. If you don't have a way to characterize your present state, when you move forward with this, you won't know how effective or if it's making any difference. So you want to have metrics, for example, like time to detection. How long is it taking you to become aware that something's happened? You want it to be as fast as possible. And again, AI gives us the opportunity to make that really, really, really fast. So leverage that. Part of measuring the effectiveness of your AI implementation can be indeed seeing an improvement in your time to detection. Then look at your resolution speed. Now, you don't want these issues to be sitting on the shelf waiting to be dealt with, as you know that this is incurring that debt, whether technical or non-technical, but this debt, and you know that that has a tendency to increase, to become worse and worse until it explodes, and finally you have to deal with it, but in an emergency. You don't want to get to that. So the shorter your resolution speed becomes, the less the likely that you're going to end up with those really bad scenarios that you have to clean up. And then look at the frequency of incidents and also the frequency of your retrospectives. Is how frequently are you experiencing issues? How frequently are you talking and looking for issues? Keep a track of all of this because that's going to give you indicators of the effectiveness of moving in this direction. And you want to create a culture that supports continuous learning, encouraging small, low-risk experiments. It's the mindset that was open to doing experiments on production systems is what led to eventually Netflix doing their Chaos Monkey uh, testing on production systems. No, they're breaking production systems. And that mindset eventually leading to SRE today. It starts with low risk experiments. Learn how to experiment and learn how to learn from your experiments. This is something that's not already part of your culture. You need to create that. It's a cultural shift that no longer looks for blame. And we're shifting now from this feeling of fear for blame and being singled out to genuine curiosity. It's, I want to find out what happens when. Well, you just thought of a use case, a scenario. Go for it. Find out. Now that we know, now we can take action on it. So there's a lot of benefit that comes from moving in this direction, and we can hopefully make not only the workplace better, but hopefully even save some lives along the way. There's a lot of opportunity, and AI increases that opportunity significantly. So, how does your company culture support the early discovery of problems? And if it doesn't, do you think that moving in that direction would result in fewer problems and happier customers? And if you already support it, what benefits do you see from this way of looking at problems as learning opportunities? Let us know in the comments. And if you'd like to learn more about psychological safety, click one of these. I'll be happy to tell you all about it.